go back over a few topics from the Quiz 5 review so we can make sure we got a good feel for this. So I'm actually going to start at number 4.
You skip 1, 2, 3?
I am skipping 1, 2, and 3. So, right, because I'm going to do some, but you get to do the rest. So, number 4, my first job whenever I'm doing these solving by square roots, okay? And I know not all of them are x squared. Some of them are n's and m's and a's and everything else. But my first job is to isolate or get that squared term alone before I take the square root. And I'll talk about one exception to this that actually didn't show up on this sheet. And in retrospect, I wish I'd have made it work somehow. So, for instance, on number 4, it's going to take me 2 steps to get to my goal. My first goal's got to be to get the squared term by itself. And I'm going to zoom a little bit here. So, those of you checking things, sorry, we're out of focus here for a moment. Okay, longer than a moment. Okay. So, what do I have to do to get my first job accomplished? Subtract 3. Nice. All right. Next step. Divide by 9. Because again, I want that m squared by itself before I go to my final step, which is to take the square root. Now, reminders. When I get to my last step and I take the square root, because again, squared and square root are inverses. The squared reminds me there are 2 answers, which means I have to have plus minus. I also want to take a look and make sure I can't break my radical down. Now, if I can't, like if I do square root of 2, and I'm like, no, and there's not 2 numbers I can multiply. This here?
Yeah.
Nope, 18 divided by 9 is still 2.
Oh, I squared it.
Yeah, if it was 6, I'd be on board with you. But if it doesn't break down, if I can't do anything, I don't really want the decimal. I want the exact answer. So I'll just go ahead and I'll leave it as plus or minus 2. Okay. Now, sometimes, though, it may break down for me a little nicer than that. So let's say I go down to 6. Now, I look like I'm kind of in the same dilemma that I was on the first one. I want to get my a squared alone first. So that's always going to be my first job. Now, this is the part where I'm going to have to think about this a little and why it's good that we don't go to decimals. You're like, okay, I got to divide by 49 to get a squared by itself, which I would agree. And you're like, well, 4 over 49, if I take the square root of that, that's going to be a decimal. I agree, but let's think about this for a second. If it's a fraction, I can look at each of the pieces of the fraction kind of as its own thing, sort of like as if I was doing this. Now, to me, that makes life a lot better in this case. Yeah. Because these are both perfect squares. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 49 is 7. And I can actually get to an answer. So always be looking for those perfect squares and factors that are perfect squares to be able to break things down a little bit more and make it a little bit easier on yourself. Now, the one type of problem I didn't get on here, and I'm going to sort of write it over next to 6 here so you can kind of see how this works. And it was a place where we had a little bit of a struggle. Let's say I have something like this. Let's see here. Something like this is my problem. It's kind of our bonus problem in the section. Okay. This time, I can't get to the x squared right away without doing the square root. I don't want to distribute. Okay. I don't want to do x squared plus 1. What I have to do here is I got to get rid of the parentheses to get to my x. So I go ahead, I take my square root. And this time, I look at my 20 and I say, ooh, now that's not a perfect square, but there is a way with 2 numbers I can multiply with one of them being a perfect square. 4, and 5. And remember, I'm still taking square roots of those because this is the square root of 20. So right, the square root of 4 is 2, square root of 5, and now my only step left is to minus that 1 out of there. This is the only time that I will be taking the square root before my final step, is if I have the parentheses like that. Okay, so this is kind of in its own little world here. Because every other time we do it, it's going to be like what we're doing in 1 through 6. I'm going to do everything to get that squared term alone, then I'm going to do the square root, except if I've got the parentheses. Okay? So that was one section on the quiz where I definitely saw some issues going on. Because mainly what had happened is people took the square root too quick, and then they had all sorts of issues with things. So we want to try and hold off on that as long as we can. Okay, another one of our buddies from the quiz. You know it. The Algebra 2 F word. And I'm actually going to start on the next page with this one. Okay, we're going to head into factoring here. We're going to take a peek at 12 and 14 because there's a couple of twists with these that I want to make sure we're aware of. Okay, first rule, when we're solving with these, I need to see equals 0. If it doesn't say equals 0, I have to fix that. So on number 12, that 8 is a problem. How do I fix that? Subtract it, okay? And I subtract it from the constant or the numeric part on the other side. Okay, once it says equals 0, now I'm ready to do my actual factoring on this. Now the fortunate part for me here, it's a diamond type problem. It just says b squared. There's no number in front. So I go ahead and I get my parentheses ready. I remind myself I'm multiplying to get the number on the end. Yep, and adding to get the number in the middle. And I run through my clues before I get playing around with numbers. So I look and I go, okay, my multiply number, my product, is positive, which means one of two things has to happen. They're either both positive or they're both negative. And when I look at my sign in the middle, that tells me what the answer is to that. They both have to be negative this time. Exactly. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 56 and add up to 15, which would be 8 and 7. Okay, since we're not sliding and dividing, there's nothing else to worry about. That's just it. So I'm going to set each of those equal to 0. Then I'm going to add my 8 to both sides. I'm going to add my 7 to both sides. And I'm going to get my answers. But again, I've got to follow the steps in order. If I go into a different order or try to factor this while the 8's still over there, I'm going to run myself into all sorts of dilemmas. So I got to get the equal 0 part. But at least on the next one we're going to do together, number 14, that's already done for me, the equal 0 part. So I don't have to worry about that part. On 14, do all those terms have anything in common where I could take something out? Kind of looking. I'm like, they're all divisible by 3? No. They're divisible by 7, but that's not, yeah, no, not really. Okay. Slide and divide. Now again, I got to remind myself, again, what this is called. It's called slide, which we're going to do here right away. Not the prettiest number to deal with, but we've got help. We can do this. I'm looking for the positives and things. Well, I see positive and positive, so everything's going to be positive. That's a good thing. You're like, yeah, but you don't have to worry about the multiply to 147 and add to 28. Oh, I still do. Now, this is just me. You've still got the green sheet where you've got the chart on the back if you want to do it that way. But if not, I start working through it. Maybe I start with some small numbers. I'm like, I don't know, how about 3? Oh, I'm told 7's the way to go. Okay, let's do that. 147, 7. 7 and 20. I'm with you. 7 and 21 add up to 28. So I get that in there. Nice. But remember, yeah, it's slide and divide. If you only slide, you don't get the right answer. We got to do the divide part. Now again, if it reduces nice, that's nice. 21 divided by 3 is 7. If it doesn't, make sure before you slide this back that that's totally reduced. Math enter, whatever you got to do, but this one is. Slide that back to the front. And now I can go through and set my parentheses, my quantities equal to 0, bless you, and get my answers. And again, don't get to this part and then try to go so fast that you do something sloppy and it just kind of messes everything up. Take that extra second, write your step out. Keep life simple. That's all we got to do. There we go. Thank you. Okay, and that's it on these. So whether it's a diamond or whether it's a slide and divide, the process works the same. We factor it out. We set each set of parentheses, each quantity equal to 0, and we solve those. So we've got one piece left. It's the part that can get a little with us here. Well, I'm not going to say one part left, but one page left here. Now, we were really good with completing the square. Now, the issue was when I asked for it in Vertex Form, which is one of the 3 ways we did it. We solved, we did it with circles, and we did it in Vertex Form. We kind of forgot some stuff with the Vertex Form. So there's an example up there, but I'm going to work through the first one with you, just so we can see how this goes. So, okay, when we're doing this, my first job is going to be, I'm going to add a blank on the y side, and I'm going to add a blank with my x's on the right side. I'm going to sort of group them off, and I'm going to kind of shoo the -8 outside because it doesn't have an x. That actually, I have a feeling, is going to be the trickiest part for a lot of you. Because once we do that, the completing the square part, you guys did excellent with on this. You take your b term, that number in front of x, divide it by 2, and square it. And it's a good idea to write that out for 2 reasons. One, well, now I know what number goes in here. That's a good reason to begin with. And once I have that value, to get it into its binomial form, which is what we need to solve it, is easy too. Because I get my x in there, what number is going to go with my x in the parentheses? -3, my b divided by 2 value, the ones in the parentheses over here.
Wait, I thought you added that and was that?
When we're doing it in Vertex, I do it once to each side, so I'm doing it once on with my x's and then once on the y side. This is kind of our weird one. If we're just doing regular completing the square, we just add it to the very end. But when we're trying to get to Vertex Form, it tweaks just a little bit. Because you'll notice now, since we're trying to get to Vertex Form, which looks like this, that we're pretty close. Really, the only thing that's different is I don't have y by itself yet. So I've got to minus the 9. And then it would be in Vertex Form. And that's it. Okay. And if I asked you to find the vertex, that'd be an easy thing to do too. I didn't, but it just kind of lets us see where the application would be for us. Okay, it gets us into a form that's a little bit easier to work with. So that's what we do when we're completing the square in vertex form. Okay, once to the y side, once with the x's on the right side, and then we go from there. 4 through 6 is a repeat from what we did on the front, so I won't keep you rolling in with that very long. So to the back, here's where the monster points got lost, like 5 and 6 and 8 and whatever. Now, I will mention one thing as I zoom back out a little bit. You need to make an adjustment on your worksheet here. Again, Harty worksheet, you can always tell. That place where it says x plus 5, that needs to say x plus 3. Because otherwise, this is not going to work out well. So we go back and we saw this a couple of different times before this last quiz. Okay, the area of a rectangle shown is 40 square meters. Reminder, area is length times width. So when I go to set this up, because this was originally a 3-point question on the quiz, so I've got area 40 equals length times width. Now, when I get here, I actually have to multiply this out. Okay, I can't just set those equal to 0 and say I'm done, unfortunately. That'd be nice, but it just doesn't work that way. So I multiply the x through the x and to the 3. And now I start to go, oh, all right. So if I'm going to factor this, which is probably the easiest way to go about it, I need this to equal 0. So I'm going to minus my 40. So I get my 0. And my job is going to be to factor what's left. So we're going to shift over to the right here a little bit. So let's see here. Two numbers that multiply to negative 40, tells me there's one of each sign, and that are 3 apart from each other. 8 and 5. And since it's a plus in the middle, the 8 gets the plus, because we want that to be the bigger value. So I set those guys equal to 0. And get these solved for x. But then I stop and I think for a second. Because sometimes there's a difference, there's a disconnect between doing it in algebra and doing it with an actual application. We're talking about the sides of a rectangle here. Which answer doesn't make sense? Yeah, negative 8 doesn't make sense for the side of a rectangle. So I get x equals 5, but wait, make sure we finish. Dimensions of the rectangle. In other words, take the 5, plug it back in. Plug it back in there. Well, that's pretty simple. That's just 5. And then 5 plus 3 is 8. It's a 5 by 8 rectangle, which makes sense because 5 times 8 is 40. Okay, everything comes together nicely. So you're going to have one to be able to work through as well to make sure that we've got you in good shape here. So the last one we're going to take a peek at is number 9. Because again, it's not a tough problem, it's just reminding yourself how to work through the process. So let me bump this up a bit. Okay, I've even got the directions on here for what have you do. Again, I wouldn't do that on the quiz, but at least get you a start here. So AJ throws a block up in the air. The height of the block can be modeled by the function f of x equals negative 16x squared plus 8x plus 11, where x represents the time elapsed in seconds. Use your graphing calculator to find when the block hits the ground. Okay, I want to find the 0. I need to trap that in. So I'm going to go to my calculator. I'm going to get it turned on here, get my y equals. I'm going to type the expression in. And I'm actually going to hit graph here because I want to see what's going on. So my job is I'm trying to find this value. Because again, I want to know when it hits the ground. This value wouldn't help me because that's just telling me that's going to be a negative. Negative time doesn't make sense. So like it says up here, we're going to use second and trace and 0 because we're trying to find the x-intercept, which is also called a 0. And we've talked before about this whole trapping thing. Okay, the trapping thing works where I've got this parabola and I'm looking for this point, this 0, so I'm going to trap it above and below. And the way I do that is by moving left and right. There's my cursor guy. Okay. As long as my y value is positive this first time, okay, that'll be to the left, and it'll help me trap. So I hit enter. So I just locked this point up here in. So now I'm going to go and hit my right button until my y becomes negative. Because then when it becomes negative, I've got a positive and a negative. I'm going to trap that value that's in between. So I'll just hit enter twice. And the x value is how long that'll take. The y value just tells me its height, which is 0, which is the ground. So I know I did it right. And I can find that value. So I've also got that situated for you to practice on number 10. Now again, this is going to be part of the next homework check, which is going to be Thursday or Friday, depending on how the testing thing works out. So either way, I will have you a homework check the next time we get together to be able to work on. And this would be a good thing whether you're doing the retake or whether you're not, because some of this stuff's going to be on the next quiz as well.